familiar story. George Shire tonight talked about discovering wrestling as a kid on a black and white television, which gives his age away. I'm going to give my age away because I discovered professional wrestling as a teenager in New Jersey, went on a black and white television. And when the first live event came to my home arena in Trenton, New Jersey, I went. And here's Argentina Rocker and Carl Von Hess and Chief Big Heart, and Haystacks Calhoun and Bobo Brazil and Mark Lewin and Don Curtis and Skull Murphy and Brooke Bernard. And as an impressionable kid at that age, I looked at this cast of characters bigger than life that now off of black and white television, there they were in the arena, in the atmosphere of a live event. And I decided that day that I wanted to become a professional wrestler. I'm sure my parents, though they never said so to me, probably thought I was crazy and I would grow out of it. But I didn't. I persevered. And back in those days, they didn't have wrestling schools or they didn't have developmental territories. And it was really difficult to get into the business because with all the territories, everybody was self-employed. And so why would they help some young kid get into the business? Because if you had any talent and got elevated, you might be the one that takes their job and moves them out of the business. So it was very, very hard getting in. So I hung around. Was not going to be deterred. And I sold programs. I used to have a 10-cent program that when you folded it over, there was the card for the night on the front and the future matches in the back and a picture in the middle. And the guy, because I went to all the matches I could get to in my area, and they would recognize me and he'd get me in to sell his programs so I wouldn't have to buy a ticket. And a couple times at the end of the night, they were short-handed and I'd help tear the ring down. Bottom line, there isn't anything that I wasn't willing to do. And I became a familiar face and befriended some people. One of the people that I befriended was the original Zebra Kid, George Tragos. I asked him, I said, I want to be a professional wrestler, can you give me any advice? And the advice he gave me is the same advice when I'm asked even today that same question. He said, wrestling is a tough business. He says it's physical, physical confrontation, so the risk of injury is certainly great. And he said, I'll be honest with you, a lot more guys see it on TV, think, oh, it's exciting, and fall by the wayside. There's more that don't make it than do make it. So he said two things. Number one, he said, get your education. He said, get a degree. And he said, because if you have that, you can stick it in your back pocket. Wrestling will always be there. And if something happens that you don't make it, you have a college degree to fall back on. And the second thing he told me, he says, learn the fundamentals of amateur wrestling. You will be a better professional as a result of it. Well, at that point in New Jersey, they had no scholastic wrestling program. I'd never ever seen a professional or an amateur wrestling match. So I went to a small college in Pennsylvania to get my degree, as George Bolison suggested. I made the team in a small school only because I was the only one that volunteered in that weight class. But Pennsylvania was a hotbed of wrestling, so there were guys there that had wrestled all their life. I was a fish out of water. But they helped me because they knew that I wanted to learn, and through the conditioning and the drills and the scrimmages, I learned at least fundamentals of amateur wrestling. But in terms of my ability, quite frankly, I wasn't very good. But now all of a sudden, I got my degree, I got a bachelor's degree. I'd gone out for the wrestling team, and boy, now what? And now what was nothing. So I continued to hang around doing everything that I'd always done. And they used to have a big show in Philadelphia once a month. Ray Fabiani was the promoter, and Cole Coriani, that had interest in rock, would come, and Toots Ma, and I would hang around, just hang around. And they would do a weekly television show at the NBC studio to promote just the big show in Philadelphia. And I would go down with a guy that helped get the ring out of storage and set it up, and he'd take I wear a t-shirt, he'd take one out of one corner, he'd take the jacket out of the other corner. Well, one week the weather was really, really bad, and a storm hit and got worse as the day went on. Come time to do the show, enough wrestlers there to tape an hour of wrestling, but the referees were assigned by the athletic commission and no referee showed up. So they started looking around, and again, I was a familiar face. Somebody looked at me and said, "Kid, can you referee?" "Oh, yes." And I remember the only instructions they gave me was walk 3 sides of the ring. Whatever you do, don't walk between that camera and the wrestlers. We don't want to see your ass on TV. Those are the only instructions they gave me. Well, I must have done a good job, because the next thing you know, I was on the list of referees for Eastern Pennsylvania and then later New Jersey, and I did that for 6-8 years. And I had other jobs. I taught school for years, a permanent substitute. I sold life insurance. I settled bodily injury claims. I did anything, but I continued to go to wrestling. And there was a time where I thought, you know, maybe being a referee was as far as my dream would carry me. What I didn't realize at the time, that I was in the ring for many of Bruno Sammartino's big championship matches, and I learned more without realizing it, being the third man in the ring with some of the greatest talent in the business, to understand at least the psychology of what this business was all about. And then, about 6 years in, Eddie Farhad, whose name was mentioned earlier, the original Sheik, came in for a series of matches. In the dressing room, I said, "You know, my real dream was to be a wrestler." He says, "Well, I promote in Ohio and Michigan." He said, "You can come out, bring your tights, put you in the ring, and we'll see what you know." So now I made that next step. The first time around, it was only a 3-day long weekend. A year later, it was a week's vacation, and he booked me in all the towns. And then that led to me finally, because I'd known Bruno Sammartino so well all those years, he had an interest in a promotion that ran weekends around Pittsburgh. Talked to Bruno, and all of a sudden I was booked every weekend in Pittsburgh against some really great guys, and learned now the mechanics of wrestling. A guy named Jim Grabmeyer came home every year. He was from Ohio, and he'd wrestle around there in the wintertime. And then the summer, he would go to Charlotte, because they do a lot of outdoor shows and they didn't expand the roster. So I had a job, still working on weekends, and all of a sudden I got a phone call out of the blue. Jim Grabmeyer. He said, "Well, I'm in Charlotte. I took one of your pictures. They're looking for talent." He said, "You said this was your dream." And he said, "Based on my recommendation, they'll book you." Now, they're short on the babyface side, so I don't know if that's a problem. And I said, "No, it wouldn't be a problem." So I packed everything I owned into an old beat-up Chevy, quit my job, and drove from Warren, Ohio, which, strangely enough, is where George Bolus was from, straight south. I'd never been further south than Richmond, Virginia in my life. Drove through to Charlotte, and on that Monday night in the Charlotte Park Center, I wrestled Gene Anderson, my first match as a full-time professional wrestler, 28 years old, months from my 29th birthday. Living my dream, finally at last. Gerald Briscoe was there. He was already a main eventer. He was as a single, and with Thunderbolt Patterson. And I figured out along the way, and I shared this with some of the guys that we did evaluations with yesterday. There are 4 things in wrestling if you're going to make it. Number 1, you got to have a passion. Boy, I sure had that passion. Number 2, you have to have perseverance, because there's a lot of times along the way where you say, you know, hey, this ain't for me, this sucks, I'm going to quit. And then the third thing is you need help. And I had Jerry Briscoe, and I would be here, keep you here all night. And Brian Blair would run out of Rolaids if I tried to list all the names of all the people that helped me, but there were a lot of them. And then the fourth thing that is elusive is the luck factor. And that is, you can love the business, you can persevere, you can have help, but if you don't have the good fortune of being in the right place at the right time when an opportunity presents itself, you never get beyond a certain level. I had luck the night of the snowstorm. Got to be a referee. I had the good fortune when the Sheik came in, let me put my trunks on and get in the ring for the first time to take the next step. Had the luck of meeting Jim Grabmeyer, going to Charlotte, and having a lot of people help me, and I was there for 2 years. And my first 5 years, I was a full-time wrestler, which a lot of people weren't aware of that. And I went from the Maritimes to Florida for a year, 2 trips to Japan, which was a dream. Gerald was on a tour together with me, and then I was in Florida where Archie Goldie was there, who I'd known from the Mongolian Stomper from the Maritimes, and I knew him from Florida. I get a phone call one day. He says, "This is Archie," and he said, "I'm up here in Tennessee," and Bearcat was my manager, and for some reason it didn't work out. He said, "I gotta get out of here." And he said, "I've got a top spot in Dallas, but I need a manager." You ever thought about managing? Nope. And he said, "Well, I've heard your interviews, and I was not blessed with the type of body like Larry the Axe Hennig or Superstar Graham, but my interviews I did spend a lot of work on. So I told Archie, I said, "Archie, I'd have to get a blessing from Eddie Graham first," which he gave me. So as one door in life closes, another opens again. The right place, the right time, with good fortune. Went to Dallas. Fritz von Erich was owning the territory. Red Bastien was his matchmaker, booker. And I remember getting there. We walked in, and Red looked at 2 of us, and he said, "Let's see, the Mongolian Stomper managed by Jim Dillon. Doesn't jump out at you, something missing there." So thanks to Red Bastien, it became the Mongolian Stomper managed by James J. Dillon. And from that day forward, that was my identity, and I have Red Bastien to thank for that. I had a wonderful career. A lot of people, again, I was the right place, the right time with Tully in Charlotte when the thing happened with the Horsemen that we talked about at much great length today. I'm the luckiest guy on the face of the earth because I had all 4 things. I had that good fortune. And all of a sudden, at the end, I had 2 Hall of Fame rings. First one, I'm not sure how I got, but somebody decided they wanted to induct the Horsemen into the WWE Hall of Fame, which meant that it included me. And then the following year, Tony Villano called me from the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And that meant more to me because there was a process, and it was an honor just to be on the ballot. And no matter what you do in life, if the peers in your business respect you and recognize what you have accomplished and vote you in, that is the greatest honor that you can have no matter what you do in life. So that meant a lot to me when Tony Villano called me and says, "You were in the class of 2013 in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame." Now that brings me to here. Now I knew there was a 3rd major Hall of Fame in Waterloo, Iowa. I was kind of reluctant to even think about coming here because as an amateur, which is kind of what I thought this was about, I wasn't very good. In fact, I even joked about it. I said, "Oh, well, if I ever went to Waterloo, I'd probably have to buy a ticket to get into the museum, and even then, they'd want to sneak me in the back door in case somebody recognized me and wonder what the hell I was doing there." Well, 2 years ago, Jerry Briscoe was honored by CAC, and rightfully so, because Jerry Briscoe should be in everybody's Hall of Fame. The Chickasaw Hall of Fame, the championship wrestler from Florida, the first year he and Jack was tag team. He should be in the Hall of Fame, not because he and Jack were a great tag team, certainly not because he's Jack's brother, but because of what he accomplished in his own right. And he really deserves that recognition. But he was honored by CAC 2 years ago, and some people from Waterloo came. Kyle Klingman was one. I want to say Bill Murdoch was another, and I think Troy came too. And Gerald introduced me to Kyle Klingman. Kyle came up and he said, "We wish you would come up to Waterloo." Looked around, yeah, he was talking to me, and he said, gave me his business card, and he said, "We would be honored if you would come up there. You would have such a wonderful time. It's a great facility." And I was kind of just blown back. Total misconception of my mind. And the next day he sent me a personal email. Said he was honored to meet me and reinforced it. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to come to Waterloo. I want to come see what it's all about, because obviously I had the whole thing wrong." And my son, who's here, I have three of my children here. My first daughter, Pam, is here, who's an executive with a major bank. Jeffrey and Missy are twins who came along later in life. And when it comes to the best amateur wrestler in the family, it's Jeffrey, because in his junior and senior year at Old High School in Henry County, Georgia, in spite of his disability, he lettered in wrestling. So he's the by far the best amateur wrestler in the family. So anyway, he wanted to come with me. He's met the who's who in the professional ranks, but was so excited to come up here at the thought that he was going to meet Dan Gable. So we came up here. I had no idea what to expect. And when I walked in the front door of the museum, I was blown away, because Rob was there, Rob Schamberger, with this magnificent mural, 8 feet high by probably 20 feet long, and he was there putting the finishing touches on it, and it was breathtaking. And as I took the tour of the museum and saw all the other artwork that he had done and donated and put on display, and the more I walked around, and then I got to meet Dan Gable. And Dan Gable was a very humble person, but the people like Dan Gable don't have to tell you what they accomplished or how good they are. There's automatically just an aura around them. Now, the Tragos Thez, last year I met Tragos and George Tragos, and I guess it was, he helped train Lou along with Strangler Lewis, right? So his son was here. Jim Londas, one of the great names in the business, his daughter was here. And then Kurt Hengel, who had been inducted a few years earlier, came last year. He was Olympic gold medal winner from '96. And here's Dan Gable, Olympic gold medal winner from 1972. If there was ever a year where I was destined to come here, it was last year. And told Kyle, said, "I'm coming back." Then when I got the call from Kyle Klingman that I was going to receive this award, I truly, as I told him, I was humbled and lost for words. And I only met Lou. I didn't meet Lou Thesz one time in my life, in the ring. Did wrestling in Amarillo. I had 3,200 professional matches in a 20-year career. In the first 5 years wrestling full time, I was in Amarillo battling Dick Murdoch every week, who was beating me to death. And I learned a lot from him, and as I told a little earlier, I told him that he should be in the Observer Hall of Fame. And he said, "Oh, but I didn't." And I said, "No, I know, there's a process. You don't have the power to do that. And if you automatically did it, your integrity would be out the window and everybody else would be nothing." But I went, in Amarillo, opposite dressing rooms at opposite ends of the building. So I didn't get to see Lou until I stepped in the ring. And as with Dan Gable, there was an aura about just seeing Lou Thesz stand there. And he was brought in because I had been in my obnoxious self and abused referees, and they brought him in to get things back under control. And I remember one spot in the match, I hip tossed. A lot of you guys probably don't even know what that is. Hip toss, stick Murdoch and put him in a short arm scissors. And Lou got down on his hands and knees and crawled close enough to me where I could hear him, and he said, "Hey kid, that used to be my specialty." I didn't know whether to jump up and break the hold or what to do. But anyway, that was my meeting with Lou Thesz. He declared Murdoch the winner, and I know I took exception to his decision, and there was a physical confrontation, and Lou put me in my place, and that is the only time that I ever met Mr. Thez. So to have his name on this plaque, God, it's 2 years ago, I would have thought I'd have to sneak in the back door to come here, and now 2 years later, I'm being awarded this plaque. It means so much to me.
Excuse me. That was really moving. And congratulations, JJ.